Welcome to our LA County Library virtual event, Creative Careers Paths in Animation. I'm Lyda Truick with LA County Library, and I'll be your host today. Creative Career Paths is a series exploring careers in the entertainment, film, TV, and media industries. In today's program, director and producer Kimberly Browning will be having a conversation with animation professional Elizabeth Ito. First, I'd like to introduce Kimberly Browning, who is facilitating our conversation. Kimberly is a filmmaker based in LA and is the founder and festival director of Hollywood Shorts Film Festival, which launched in 1988. She's an associate short film programmer at Tribeca Film Festival and a senior programmer at Catalyst Content Festival. She's been the executive producer of HBO Accents since 2015 and is now part of the new Warner Media Access programs team, developing emerging writers and directors in episodic television. Today, Kimberly will be speaking with animator, writer, and director Elizabeth Ito. Elizabeth Ito is a 15-year veteran of the animation industry. She's worked for many different studios on TV, feature, and commercial projects. Her many credits include supervising director on Adventure Time, feature storyboard artist on Hotel Transylvania, Astro Boy, and the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water. In 2017, she won an Emmy for directing the Adventure Time episode Islands Part 4, Imaginary Resources, and she's an alumni of CalArts. She's also the creator of the award-winning short Welcome to My Life, which to date is the second most viewed short in Cartoon Network history. It won the Audience Award for Children aged between 12 and 17 at the New York International Children's Film Festival and Best Film for Children at the Zagreb World Animation Festival. Elizabeth's first series, City of Ghosts for Netflix Animation, premiered in 2021 and was just nominated for a Peabody Award. Currently, Elizabeth is living in Los Angeles, staying home with her family, and coming up with new ideas for fun projects to make. So, with all of that said, I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly to get us started.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. Appreciate that great introduction. And thank you all for joining us on a Saturday morning. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Really appreciate you taking the time. We always get so excited when we talk about different career opportunities in animation, and it's such a huge world, and it's just grown so much in terms of the types of jobs. And so today we're really excited to take the lid off and demystify a little bit about how it's just such a magnitude of what these jobs are called and how do you get into these jobs. And so we just have to start with, how did you start? How did you find those opportunities? You speak so beautifully on your website, elizabethito.com, everybody. I always like to ask about when something you thought you just liked to do that maybe was a hobby connected and ignited the artist within. And how did you speak really beautifully about how your drawing became a superpower for you. And so if you could recap that a little bit for us and share what your journey's been.
Yeah, for sure. When I was really little, like drawing was one of the first things that I just used to express myself. Mostly it was to like express feelings in ways where it was easier for me to draw how I felt than maybe say it out loud. Um, and I think like the first job that I thought I wanted to have was like being a children's book creator. Um, but between when you're like 5 years old and when you graduate high school, there's kind of a lot of time to think about what you actually want to do. And it actually took me like, I mean, it's not really that long, but it took me until the end of high school to really discover like animation as a thing that I wanted to do. I think like I had always thought I want to do something artistic because I love to draw, but I don't know what industry that fits into. And then I happened to go to this state-funded summer program called CISA. It stands for the California State Summer School for the Arts. I think they still do it. But you apply to it and then they kind of get back to you about whether or not you've been accepted. So it was this whole process, and I think I applied to that program in animation because, like, honestly, it was because that was one of the few things that they didn't offer at like my high school, because I didn't really go to a specialty high school. Um, so I applied for that, and then I just discovered that it was this thing that was really cool. I mean, like, even at that program, it was kind of more like experimental animation people that were teaching the program, but I think maybe that was like actually a really good introduction into animation, because one of the things that it taught me was just that it's not about drawing alone. It's about kind of like, it's about timing, it's about music, it's about film, it's about bringing all of these things together that were all um, just things that I liked to do. So yeah, and then it was just a matter of figuring out, like, well, like, how do I turn this thing that I found into like a profession, because that also seemed like a hurdle.
I think a lot of people that think about how to do art as a career end up, like you said, going into children's illustration or theater, right? And so it's really amazing that you had access to a summer camp. And so at that summer camp, did they activate mentally that your skill could be a job? Like, you know,
I think in some on some level, yeah. Like they definitely there was like a field trip or two to like a studio to
okay.
see what they do. And one of the main teachers in that program who taught life drawing, Corny Cole, like he was also a teacher at Cal Arts, but also he like came from doing just like traditional animation, um, from like the early days of Disney. And I think it was really good to have somebody like that as pretty much a mentor, because they've been through the whole process. Like, they started out in the industry and they kind of were at a point where they also knew sort of like the difficulties in the industry of like being an artist. So it was really nice to have like the introduction to animation be a little bit like level, as like trying to like teach you that, like, like, definitely try to keep your spirit as an artist, but the industry itself is kind of a whole other thing.
And we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
As you were growing up, um, you connected your personal journey, your personal emotion. It was your drawing was your dear diary. And I think what was so special about your first short film, well, the one that really exploded, your school short, was that that was your thesis, right?
Yeah, it was like
Right.
the last one that I did.
Right. Um, was connected to family again, personal. Uh, and so can you talk a little bit more about how what were those things as you look back that help connect the dots of where the passion comes from, or how to navigate those early tools, because that's where you were kind of self-teaching yourself in terms of how to express yourself through your drawing that manifested once you got to school. And I think there are a lot of people that have these instincts when they're younger, and especially people who maybe don't end up going to art school. Can you talk a little bit more about um, you talk a little bit about your mom's connection with it, a little bit about a teacher recognizing that you had talent. Can you share? Because many times you have to be the person that has to identify that you have talent, because you might not have that teacher, or you might not have that parent that values art as a life skill. So can you talk a little bit about just what your journey is? We have a lot of parents here that listen to this, and it could be really insightful for them of what to look for and how to encourage your child. So that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think my mom was an elementary school teacher, like a public elementary school teacher. So already within that, there was a lot of stuff infused into the way that she handled parenting, I think.
Mm.
And sort of as like, I guess it's sort of like a really sensitive teacher to her students, where it's like really trying to be a good teacher to them. Like I don't know how else to put it but that, like where it's like you're really trying to listen to what your students need beyond how they perform on a test, beyond like the things on paper that um people are looking for sometimes. And I think like having somebody as a parent like that where if in their I noticed like in her class, if a student's struggling, you really try to figure out why are they struggling, like I think sometimes it was even stuff like where I remember talking to her once about there were students in the like they were in the gifted program, but they were also in the resource program. And I remember asking her like, how are those how are those two things possible? And I remember her just saying like, it doesn't mean that somebody's not smart or they're not talented in some way just because they struggle in other arenas. So I think that kind of provided a good basis of somebody, encouraging me. I know there were even times where she signed me up for like an art class, and I came out of the art class and I was like really little. I was maybe like 5 or like 4 or 5. And I asked her once when we drove past it when I was older, like, why did I not go back there for like lessons? And she said she said something like, I remember you were so upset that your stuff didn't look like the teacher's work, that I felt like maybe we should find something else because like it wasn't you weren't supposed to have stuff that looked like the teachers, like you're a kid. So I just thought maybe there was a different approach that would
That's
be better for
amazing.
you. um so yeah, I don't know if that answers that question, but I think
Does.
it was like generally having kind of that support of somebody that could see beyond yeah, like awards or just the performance things in school.
Can you identify where on that teen timeline that you identified, I want to pursue this? Should I go to art school? Should I go to regular school so I can get a regular job and have? Can you talk a little bit about what the thought process was? Did you have any other interest? And how did you ultimately decide when you got out of high school where your next move was going to be?
Yeah, it's complicated because um like there was a good window of time, I think, when I was like in junior high where um I started thinking like maybe it would be more useful to people in general, if I became like a doctor, or if I became something that was like in my mind just like more directly helpful to people. um and I remember telling like my grandpa that, and they were really happy. And they were like, cool, and then I think there was something like where it was like, maybe you could just do art as a hobby then, because like it would be just more, you'd make more money as a doctor than you will as an artist, kind of thing. But there was some part of me that just kind of like heard, I think one thing I heard was like, you have to go to school for like 8 years to be a doctor, and I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I also just knew like the people that were trying to be doctors, like I just didn't feel like I could compete, like they're just like
Mm.
I didn't feel like I would succeed as well as I could at other things. um the other difficulty was like I think it wasn't necessarily for the usual reasons. Like I think with a lot of Asian families, there's a lot of pressure to, do stuff like that as a career because there's a prestige to it. But I remember like when I was applying to colleges, like I think like at first I thought I figured out I want to do animation. I'm gonna apply to art schools. I'm gonna go to Cal Arts. And my dad was basically like, you're not you I don't I'm not going to pay for you to go to art school right out of high school. And we fought a lot like in the teen years about that. Um and and honestly, like the first time that I applied to Cal Arts, I didn't get in. The first two times that I applied, I didn't get in. But I did get into UCLA. And then I remember after that happened, because I remember my dad and I got in a huge fight, and I was like, well, what if can I just go to community college? What's the point of paying for, like a university? And it was kind of like, well, you got into UCLA, so I'm not going to let you just go anywhere now. Um, but like to his point, I do actually appreciate that since my family had the resources to allow me to go to that college first. um I felt like it was a good thing to kind of get a well-rounded idea of what was out there. And I know that was part of the reason that he had said that, was like, I want you to not feel like your only talent is art. Like, you have other
Mhm.
things that you're good at, and I want you to feel like you're actually making a choice that,
Mm,
like to do that.
mhm.
And I did feel like I learned a lot of things that were helpful there. And yeah, I think it kind
So
of.
when you went to UCLA, did you take general studies that
Yeah,
first
I actually
year?
decided when I was there, like, oh, I started undecided, and then eventually I was like, I really like writing, I really like reading in
Okay.
English, so I went into
All the things that go into being a great animation creator. Imagine that. Yeah. So as you, and I think it's really, really important that people hear you did not get into CalArts one time or two times.
yeah.
Um, I'm really excited about switching a little to creative and hearing as you started learning in school and experiencing life and your initial characters um, are always so personally informed. And so, can you talk a little bit just about your creative process as it started to develop from high school to college? Were you connecting to characters that were coming up for you first? Was it scenarios or what we call plot coming up for you first? Were you animating your family? Can you talk a little bit about inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, the to be specific about, like, the docu style that's pretty common to my work right now, that definitely came from this, like, just seeing, like, Creature Comforts, I think, on Nickelodeon. Like,
Yeah,
I happened to
I
watch
love
that.
creature comforts.
Yeah. Um,
So inspirational.
yeah, definitely. And it was just a thing where I don't even think when I very first saw it, like, I'm gonna try that. It's just something where, like, I enjoy funny things. I enjoy things that are kind of weird. I definitely had a lot of inspiration from, like, Muppets and Jim Henson. And to be honest, like, I didn't know the depth of, like, how creative he was until later. I only really knew Sesame Street at the beginning of my life, and then my parents were big fans of, like, the Muppet Show, so I kind of got to know that through them. But I think it was like looking to people like that where you see them start with something as simple as, like, a sock on their hand with, like, ping pong balls on it, uh, and that's a character, and the amount of life that they can give their hand is just
Yeah.
incredible. So I think a lot of things like that are usually inspiring to me. I definitely was just, like, super into probably mostly indie movies when I was, like, coming out of high school.
Okay.
So it was like seeing these things that people were doing with, like maybe not as, like, blockbustery as most things, and feeling like that sense of, like, accessibility, you know?
Sure. It's really important of what we are watching and what we're learning from and what it's like, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
So connect the dots for us in terms of school. There's especially these days um, a lot of paths into the animation world, and it doesn't necessarily go through a traditional art college, especially with all the new tools and an audience. As we go through, we're going to be posting a ton of resources that we're going to be talking about. And then after this, Lida and her team are going to put together a lot of the links that we talk about today, things that are available in the library, and you're going to get a PDF. Um, of a lot of places on the internet and resources that are going to help you on your animation journey. Uh, and so, can you talk a little bit objectively? You set the table really about the way you thought about school. Once you did go to CalArts, in terms of relationship building and just learning technical, because you had all the things inside of you that you needed to become a hireable animator. So I believe that whether you've gone to art school or not, that was your school, your toolkit was going to grow and mature. Making the choice to go to CalArts in retrospect, can you give us the pluses and the minuses?
Yeah, for sure. The pluses are that there's just like a ton of people that work in the industry that are teaching there. So I think the reason that was a goal for me was like I had definitely tried out some of the classes at UCLA that were for animation. They have a whole animation department. But
Really reputable.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
big actors have come out of there.
yeah, and also like it felt something that I liked about it, and maybe this is just because I have Cal Arts as a comparison, but it felt kind of scrappy and cool. Like you could do
More indie.
yeah, yeah. Like there was a like if it was kind of like if you mashed up the experimental and character departments and we were all just one. Like it kind of felt like that. So people were doing a lot of what it like kind of what like dream projects and stuff like that. And like taking classes there, I liked most of the people that I met. But it's really hard as an undergrad to do that. And I think the other thing that I felt was um, I really wanted like a super technical background about how character animation specifically worked, and I kind of felt like I couldn't get the same level of that at UCLA as you can from, like Disney guys where they're showing you like little charts and they're showing you exactly how to do like animate a horse or something.
Right.
Where yeah, like CalArts has all of that. They have the resources, they have so much equipment to like
Mhm.
um allow you to do that. The obvious like I think big downside to CalArts is it's incredibly expensive. That's pretty much the biggest downside because you can end up spending like a lot of money and be in debt coming out of there, and you don't have necessarily like the promise that you're going to be able to pay it off. And I know that's like a big thing right now of people talking about student debt, and that place definitely you can acquire a large amount of debt. So I think um yeah, like to be honest, that's like a big downside. But I'm trying to think of other ones, but that's the most present one, I think, is
Yeah.
just that the
I think
cost.
as times have changed since you and I began our careers, there's so much more accessibility to information, mentorship, and instruction that it used to be there's only 4 or 5 places that you could go and then really get into the business. And I don't know that that's as true anymore. What's your
Yeah.
feeling on that?
I don't think that's true either. I think there's a lot of ways in now because people it's so much easier to kind of share your work and share what you're doing, so that kind of benefits people in a lot of ways. Like it benefits people that want to know how to do it, where they can just like see all of the stuff being done. There's a lot of like videos and things available online that can teach you like really useful things. I mean, one thing that I should mention before moving on is just that one of the benefits of CalArts is just the exposure that it gets you. So there is that aspect of it where like industry people, because they're teaching there, they're going to see you like progressing, and they're going to see what you're like to basically work with, so like um and they have this thing at the end of the year that's like a job fair where like all of the industry people go to look at your portfolio and things like that. um yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I lost I lost
No, I
concentration on
think
the
that
question,
was
but
you landed the plane really well there in terms of CalArts is one of several programs that's very engaged with the community, and they have a very active industry outreach team. So that by the time once you get into that CalArts animation program, you're on my radar. You're on the radar of
yeah,
the people who are hiring, looking, who are we going to bring up, who are those, and there's 4 or 5 schools around the country, and we'll have a lot of those in the resource guide. And so that there is some benefit to that, that it maybe expedites some of that relationship building, but it's not the only path. But it is one of the preeminent programs, and yeah, it can facilitate the fact that it's one of those schools where everybody teaching there is working. Where I don't know that that's necessarily UCLA. I love the UCLA program for people who are very artful, for people who are going to be making their individual projects that are going to be a Nina Paley or right. Um, or Kelly Sears. It's going to get an experimental multimedia. And I think CalArts and USC is really good about how the business works,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
That's great. You can do all this tech stuff. Here's the other part of how to build your career. And I think a lot of the local programs that are at the art schools per se and the community colleges now have more animation 101 and entry level than ever, which is really exciting, is getting better about having those conversations as well and getting working people in. So yeah, it's really cool. And now after COVID, I've seen people learn online and the proliferation of online learning programs. And so that's really, really cool. Um, I want to talk a little bit about as you came through school, were there online resources that you can remember that and my first stop, I remember when I discovered AWN, and I discovered it because a friend of mine ended up like selling advertising on the website. There was like a cool job. She's an animator and she got this job and she was writing comic books. And she was working there, and AWN, just when the web was just kind of becoming a thing, Animation World Network, and we'll put that link up for you guys, really became the go-to kind of my daily what's happening in the business, starting to learn the names of who was doing what and what worked where and what's the name of that software. And they had great resources. They had a great jobs board. They have every school on the planet and every animation, anybody teaching animation anywhere, you could find it in their school directory. It just was such a base camp. And then Animation Magazine and Meta, Amid, and that whole team. And so, what kind of resources, as the internet was really coming alive when you were in school, how was it a resource for you?
I feel like it more makes me think like kind of right after I graduated was when I feel like a lot of people got onto Blogger. So a lot of
Yep.
people had started blogs, including me. Um, so initially it was that, but I feel like it's kind of like that thing that happens where everybody kind of pivots from one thing to the other once certain things um, that maybe once existed don't exist anymore. Like one of the things that I really liked was like Google used to have the Google Reader where you could basically have all your blogs there and you could see when people would update. I was really bummed when they got rid of it because I feel like it kind of killed the momentum for people and their blogs.
Yeah.
Um, so I think after that, the pivot was kind of to Tumblr. So people started posting their things on Tumblr. There was a lot of like valuable information on there, and I don't know if people still do that as much. I feel like we keep kind of like pivoting to whatever the next thing is, where we can just um, have it how we like. I think maybe right now I
The
would.
Instagram was so photo forward that a
Yeah,
lot of animators moved to Insta. It seemed to fit the same thing
yeah,
Blogger was so good at making things so image centric in our character designs and stuff.
yeah. Um, I will say that like I had a lot of fun when I did sort of first get into Instagram, and like at the time there weren't a lot of extra tools, like there weren't stickers that you could post. Nobody was doing stories, but I did have this initial idea which is kind of where the genesis of where some of my style and future projects came from, where I thought like, oh, it would really be great if there was a way to like integrate my drawings into the photographs that I'm taking. And I think I
Mm.
kind of had to dig through the app store, and I found this one thing where I think it was called like Juxtaposer, which I don't know if it still exists, but there was this one app where you could do a layered thing where you could I mean I kind of had to rig it, like it's like the thing, like I took a picture of the drawing that I did and then I would have to erase around it and then I could put it onto my photos. So it's kind of like for anybody that uses like Photoshop, it was kind of like alpha channeling something. um, and then I could post that photo to Instagram. So I started doing that maybe in like 2010 or something like that, like not to date myself, but yeah, I like started doing that, and then it was just really fun because people would react and kind of be like, oh, that's so funny that you drew there's that dog in this scene or something like that. um but it was always just kind of looking for ways to like for lack of a better way to describe it, like hack things to kind of like
Yeah.
make it do what I wanted. Yeah.
Which is the bigger lesson, right? This
Yeah.
having the mentality of hackability is so crucial in having a robust creative career in animation. And I think it's a perfect way to transition into kind of post school. How do you get that first opportunity? Did you even realize it was an opportunity at the time? Did you apprentice? Did you intern? Can you talk a little bit about the logistics of building your first job opportunity? And then at that point, when you came out, and we're going to give a link that really it really has a glossary and big flow charts of all the different jobs in both traditional and 3D animation. Um, can you talk specifically about what your thought process was? Was there a strategy? Did you just apply to anything you heard of? Did you and specifically want to be a character designer because that's such an elite job? Um, I know I went to a film school that trained us to mentally think certain things were going to be there for us or to think in a way as a director and didn't really talk about the PA and where we really had to start our career. And so it was a real adjustment when we were coming out of school because we all thought we were the next Spielberg or the next Lucas. Somebody's just going to buy our screenplay and we're going to be the thing. And it was my first job ended up being as a PA at Disney in production, making coffee and hauling stuff around. Can you talk a little bit about those first steps for you?
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me, maybe the other thing that I feel like is sometimes missing, maybe a lot of times missing from the CalArts experience. Like, um, they really focus there on, at least in character animation, they focus on you making films on your own because there's always kind of the risk of, if you start to kind of make your projects collaborative, that there's also difficulty involved with that, like
Mhm.
in just humans relating to each other level, like you can get into fights and then not finish your film or something. And I think they wanted to make sure that you kind of preserve your voice as an artist and that you learn how to do it, like do every part of the job. But as you get into the industry, a really good skill to have is like the ability to know that it's a collaborative process. So there's a lot of different people that you're going to have to know how to just like get along with. um so I feel like I wasn't as prepared for like that aspect of how the industry works, that kind of like you're saying, there are so many jobs and there are so many people to keep in mind and to basically just be aware of what they do and your place in that whole sphere. um when I first was like, the nice thing about CalArts, they have a job fair. So, well, it can be nice and it can be bad because within that, there's also a lot of competition. There's a lot of feelings from people because, like, you're going to this really expensive school and you're anxious about getting a job, or you're dead set on working at Disney. So, like, you really want to get that call back from Disney. So they have this thing where, all your portfolios are out and people put up these callback sheets, or I don't know if that's how they do it anymore. Maybe they do it in a less.
Oh, that's so ruthless.
Yeah, yeah. So it was nerve wracking, and it's also like right after you've finished your film. So at least at the time I was going there, it was. So you're like raw from doing all this work, and being exhausted. Uh, and when I was like finishing up at school, like I didn't really know what I wanted. Like I kind of thought, from the experiences that I was having, I was like, I don't know, I just want a job where I can draw, and I don't know if I'm good enough to get a job as a traditional animator. That doesn't really even exist at very many places at the time that I was graduating. So I think my thought was actually like, maybe I'll just see if I can get into commercials or music videos, because that seemed like the only place where I could
And
see
like the
real.
aha music video come out, so that connected the dot between
Yeah,
animation and music video. Interesting.
yeah.
I
um,
have so many animators that like it was that aha video that showed me
yeah,
it could work in music video.
yeah.
Yeah.
The song's catchy. It looks cool. And so I thought that's what I was gonna do, and then honestly, it was um, it's that feeling of like the job chose you. Like, I
Okay.
think I surprising to my surprise anyway. I don't know if anybody else was surprised, but I was surprised that I landed a spot in the DreamWorks feature story training program, and I think it might have been their first year of doing that. And like that really set me up pretty well for um, doing storyboards as a job, and I think understanding like
And
what that.
understanding it was a great career union job.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then also like I think I didn't have any idea like how coveted that job is, sort of, by certain like areas of the industry. I think there were certain friends that were definitely jealous, where it was like they were an animator even though maybe I had wanted to be an animator. I think this realization that story is a place where there's a lot that you control about the story and the outcome of the project.
Mm.
Um, but it's also like something that was not what I thought I wanted to do, because so much of story, being a board artist and doing that job, is performance, and I don't like getting up in front of people.
What
And
do you mean by that?
um there's a point where you're going to have to pitch what you did to people. Like, you're going to have to pitch your idea. So you'll have to put storyboards at the time, because we weren't digital yet. You'd put storyboards up on a wall, and you're basically up there just acting it out, like putting on a show for this audience that you don't know if they're gonna like it. Sometimes they don't like it, and it's really quiet and uncomfortable. Sometimes that's good that they're quiet and uncomfortable, especially if you're pitching something sad. You don't want people laughing during that, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and like I'm not, yeah, like I think like I thought, well, it's a good thing I had piano recitals and things like that, because it makes you as nervous and as
Mhm.
sweaty and anxious as like doing a regular performance like that.
Just
So
as bad as a report in the front of the class in
yeah,
seventh grade,
definitely.
all those same feelings.
Yeah, and it's also like your drawings, so it's a lot of your insides are up there for people to judge and for people to give notes on, and that's also another big part of it, is like learning that in that job. I think in a lot of the jobs in animation, but specifically that job, you're gonna have to deal with getting a lot of feedback, and a lot of, maybe some, like, a lot of times it's not stuff you agree with, but you sort of have to get used to um, working like that. I don't know, like
Yeah.
just dealing with it. Uh, yeah,
I think that's a skill set no matter what career you go into. Those communication, diplomacy, working with others. Um, that's really important. A lot of people go into animation because they maybe are a little bit more of an individual self-starter. They like to work alone. And there is a part of the animation business that really is a great place for people who maybe don't like team sports so much, but a huge part of the career building and getting these union jobs, that team work aesthetic is really, really important. So I'm really glad you brought that up, and that this training program in particular made you aware that you were going to have to confront some of these issues.
yeah,
How long was
sure.
that training program at DreamWorks?
It was great. Like, I mean, if
How
I'm
long did
honest,
it last?
I think it was maybe, I forget. I want to say it was like 3 months, but it might have been like
Okay.
6 months. It was something where it was like not a full year, I don't think. And then at the end of it, there was sort of this, decision process of whether you're going to stay. I didn't end up staying. I think probably because there was another opportunity that came up, and they were kind of like maybe not psyched about that, but like that aside, like the training program itself was incredibly valuable. Like, I think I really appreciated getting to learn all that without the pressure of actually being on a real production, because there's a lot
Yeah.
of things that are different when you're actually doing it as like you're really on the job. And like also I met some people that where I'm still really tight with them, like it was a really good experience because we still, you know, get together for dinners, we still talk about where we're at in our careers, and we can also kind of lean on each other when we need either both like professional and just like emotional support. So
Collaborating.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was
And
really
job
good.
referrals. So when you get out of that program, the hope is to land a spot at DreamWorks, but that doesn't happen for everybody. So what was your journey? What happened to you?
So I didn't really end up staying because they didn't extend my contract, which was, I mean, for me, it was really disappointing because, like, it's not like it was my dream to work at DreamWorks, but I like succeeding, so it kind of felt like a little bit of like, oh, I didn't make it. Um, but like, I think like there were a couple things that happened. Like I remember somebody there had told me something like sometimes you have to leave a place before they'll let you come back and in a higher position, which was kind of true. You know, sometimes you get stuck in places where they only see you in a certain role. So like it kind of takes you
In
going
what
somewhere
way? Can
else.
you be specific?
Yeah, so like I guess if I'm talking like storyboards, it's like a
Right.
lot of times if you start as a storyboard artist, it's really hard to for them
Especially
to
if you're
like,
good at it.
yeah, like take that leap and think, oh, well, maybe you're also a director, especially for people like me, where like we're not normally directors there. So I think sometimes it takes going to another place that maybe sees you that potential in you, and so they give you that opportunity.
Mhm.
But when you're first starting out and you're trying to pay back your student loans, you don't always see that aspect of it. You're kind of like,
As an
oh,
opportunity.
yeah.
Right. And
um
I think it's really important that we talk about this because our expectations of what we think the next job should be. And for those that do end up getting into some sort of training program or internship program, many times it feels like the construct dictates you got into the internship program, so now you got to get hired. And I think you are a perfect example of how that's not the definition of success.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I love you talking about, okay, you got out of program, you didn't get the gig at DreamWorks. So what did you do next?
Oh wow, I could give you a really good story for that then, because it was like I got out of the DreamWorks program. I think maybe right after that I went to work on, I did storyboards for a couple of like not that famous movies. Like one of them was like Everyone's
These were
Hero.
freelance jobs that you were getting through referrals. Were you going to job boards?
Yeah, most of them, I think all of them were from teachers that I knew from Cal Arts who just recognized what I was good at. So it came because like my animation teacher, this guy named Kevin Johnson, I'm not sure where he's at now, but I remember he was great. He like gave me all these opportunities to work on other things because he knew that I was good at story, and I just had a friendship with him. And um I went to work on a few things, and then I ended up getting like a development deal at Disney TV to try to make a show out of my student film. Um Initially it was exciting, and then when that didn't happen, it was incredibly disappointing, and I didn't have, at that time, I don't think I didn't have like a fallback. I didn't have like another position in animation to go into, so I honestly was just like unemployed for a little while. And then like for this like a little bit of time, I honestly like worked at some place where they were paying me like, I want to say it was like $10 an hour to add like friends to these MySpace accounts of these fake characters, which is like, it's, I hardly ever talk about that job, but it's like really random. Like so when you say like it's not like a straight shot, that's absolutely correct. Like there are times where you're just gonna be like, well, I need a job right now, so I'm gonna take this thing because I somehow, like a friend I think had said, hey, I'm doing this thing, do you want to come do that too? And I was just like, yeah, I don't have anything else, so I'll do that.
And it's so important that we remember that everything that doesn't seem like it's exactly that dream is giving us skills and tool sets that we don't even realize are going to be applicable down the road. Because down there at this time, you weren't thinking about the fact that you're going to be one of the first people at Netflix Animation and that you were going to be creating and running your own show. And so during that time, you were building your portfolio, and it's such a big deal that you had that short that did really well for you, but that couldn't have been the only thing. So what were you conscious of that you were constantly trying to get better at or learning, or what others? Now you had storyboards down to get to that directing. Did you know you needed to do more characters? Do you know you needed to learn how to do backgrounds? Can you talk a little bit about how you evaluated? Now you got to find a job, any job, which opens our brain up to, oh, I need to learn how to do that. How am I going to learn how to do that on my own? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that one of the things just in general was learning to cater my portfolio towards storyboards, because I think they do a good job at CalArts of like generally telling you what to have in there, that people are going to notice you for. But it doesn't get kind of as specific as like, if you want to be a board artist, you should probably have mostly boards in there and not like some character designs here and some rigging here and some like all of these things. It's sort of you sort of have to build up like, oh, well, it makes sense that I should have like something that shows that I know how to do comedy and something that shows that I know how to do boards for television versus boards for like feature, because those can look kind of different and there can be different requirements for what you need to know how to do. Um, I mean, one thing was just being kind of open to like, I remember, I think the whole reason why I ever got hired on Adventure Time, or why I knew about Adventure Time being a thing, was because I had like just lost my job at Imaji, where I was working on Astro Boy, and then after that I was working on
What were you doing in Astro Boy?
I was a board artist on that. um, and it was like a really crazy collapse of that place, because I think it was sort of like I got a call on like a Friday when I was coming back from a trip that like, oh, the studio's shutting down, and I was just kind of like, okay. um and then Penn out of the blue kind of was like, hey, I heard stuff went down, do you want to take a test for the show that I'm starting at Cartoon Network? And
Did that go back to relationships?
yeah, and I knew Penn from school like a little bit, so I was just sort of like, yeah, I'd love to. That'd be awesome. Like, I loved his short. I loved the Adventure Time short that he did for Nickelodeon, and so I was kind of like, yeah, I'll do that. And then I ended up working on that show in the first couple seasons. Like, I was a board partner with Adam Muto, who also went to school with me. But honestly, like, we didn't know each other very well, so it was like awkward at first, because I was like, I kind of know you, but you were really quiet, and now we got to write this thing together. Um, and yeah, and then honestly, it was such a big window in between that and when I directed on the show. Like, I think I went away from Adventure Time for a while because I got an offer from Sony to do storyboards over there, which is sort of when I went over to do Hotel Transylvania, which I was also a board artist on that. Um, and then by the time I kind of felt this sense at Sony where I'm like, I don't know if there's like projects here for me right now. I don't know if there's stuff that I'm enjoying working on, so I'm not really sure what my next move should be. um like, out of nowhere, like Penn and Adam called me again, and they were like, well, now we're looking for like a director. Would you be interested? And also, like, the thing that I really appreciated was that it wasn't just, are you interested? It was like, let us like meet with you and sort of like describe to you what this job is like before you agree to it, because like we want to make sure that you sort of like have an understanding of what you'd be walking into. Because like, and to sort of like sum that up, it's basically because it's such a different job than storyboarding. Like, storyboarding is nice because you can express yourself, there's a lot of freedom to sort of like put yourself and your writing into that job on certain shows, not on every show. But on most of the ones that I was in on, you could kind of have that ability. Um, Directing for Adventure Time anyway was really more about supporting the people whose boards you were handling. So it was sort of like I was sort of more in charge of making sure that the stories that people were trying to tell in their episodes was what ends up on the screen, that it doesn't end up wildly different than what they had imagined. And I think the ability to do that, to kind of like not be putting yourself so much into somebody else's stuff, was a really important one for that particular show.
Absolutely. So when you talk about, one of the things I get excited when I hear that people are interested in getting into animation is because, as you've mentioned, there are kind of different jobs in the workflow. The you can, and the way that you've described, you're always able to kind of bounce around, and people are always picking each other up for gigs they're working on. People kind of, it's more linear than hierarchy. And so a board artist, you might board artist over here. And if somebody looks at the span of your career, the more skill set and jobs on the workflow line you learned, the more able you were to say yes when the calls came in. So did you learn all of during CalArts? Did you make sure to learn all those different skill sets, or did you come out more as a boarder and then learned as you went
I think
some
I
of the other
tried to, yeah, I mean, I think I
design,
tried to learn
backgrounds, props, lighting?
them. Yeah, I definitely tried my best to learn certain things, but you do discover along the way that there's just like, I think most importantly, there's things that you just don't enjoy as much as other things. Like I definitely like drawing characters. I like making things that look cool, but I don't have the same level of patience as some people do to make things look really cool. So
Totally.
yeah, so it was just trying to figure, like, narrow that down, like where's the jobs that fit the things that I enjoy doing, like even if like I mean, to be honest, like every job at some point is a little like it's a job still, but there are things that are easier to do as a job if you're really really into that particular part of the job.
That's helpful. And so there's, let's talk a little bit more tech stuff. During school, what was that software that was kind of 3D was popping? Can you talk a little bit about kind of the software that was essential that you needed to know, and kind of what are the new softwares that you're using a lot when you're hiring people, you're expecting them to know?
When I was coming out, it was it seriously was probably just like Photoshop and the Adobe Creative Suite. um I remember there were a lot of people who had to figure out how to get like less expensive versions because there wasn't really the option to subscribe to
And
it.
it was
So
so expensive.
yeah, so it was, for me it was probably like a cracked version of Photoshop. They can't come back after me now after how long it's been.
That's right.
But like, yeah, it was mostly Photoshop and Premiere, I think, was what we built all our stuff in. There was some other software we used to scan our animation in. I had actually been really interested in learning how to use, they had a down shooter with like I don't know if that's actually an Oxberry, but it was something where the camera's like this and you could backlight your animation, like your hand drawn animation. And I had really wanted to do that because um, I had seen so many older CalArts films that I loved so much that I wanted it to look like that. So I
Back when
kind of,
we shot animation on film with
yeah.
overhead cameras. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved that. And I love the look of like pencil tests. I like rough animation. So that was something that I was really glad I got to. Um,
So did you like make a lot of flip books? It seems like your aesthetic, you were super into that.
I
You
did
did,
make
didn't you?
a handful of flip books for sure. Um, and yeah, I mean, like, I've actually been one of those people that's been it's not necessarily like I don't want to learn things. Like I know there are a lot of people that were telling me I needed to learn how to use Storyboard Pro. There was a time where I knew how to use Storyboard Pro okay. Um I think like I kind of just try to stick with the things that I know how to use the best. That like for me, like I've always sort of built my own like I don't know, like way to do it. And the reasons for me were mostly because like I feel like for a while there, each job I was going to would have like it kind of went back and forth between people that use Macs and people that use PCs. So it was like not only getting used to sort of like the keyboards for both of those things, but getting used to the software that different studios use, which sometimes it can be they want you to use their own proprietary
Proprietary.
thing. Um, and so like I just kind of got into this mindset of like I just need something that I can take with me every single place that I go, and every single place tended to have Photoshop, and they also like whatever computer you're using has some sort of like slideshow program where if you're saving your files you can page through it like a board and you can see if it's working. And so usually whatever I'm doing, it's like that. It's like using some kind of program where I can do the drawing and then some other thing that's on that computer where I can just page through it like a slideshow.
I think that why I'm really excited you're talking about this is just that everybody realized no matter where you go, it's going to be different. And so, what I think I hear Elizabeth saying, and I completely agree, is find there's so many free things on the internet now. And Adobe finally is subscription based and monthly. So you really can afford to use it as a tool. They've got great student programs now and training programs that you can find what works for you to do the job. And then because you're going to have to be able to learn whatever job you're at, um, whether they have Cintiqs and the fancy big screens with those styluses, there's still a lot of shops that are doing it old school. So I think that's really important to the more different types of things that you can spend time learning and downloading if you find, and we're going to give you tons of links to tons, and you Google is your friend here. Free and really inaffordable animation software is everywhere on the internet, and there's normally a test. And if you tell them, hey, I'm a student, email them, I'm a student, I'm just starting out, I'm doing this on my own, they want you to use their software, and chances are they will give you help, access, and training. And so in this conversation, I like to start with Toon Boom. I think Toon Boom is the place everybody should start. And we have an 8-year-old that's joined us today that is looking to learn how to practice his own animations. We also have audience here that have really vibrant careers and have had a full life, and they're looking to say, hey, I've always wanted to get into animation. Is it too late for me? It's not, because things are so accessible now. And Elizabeth, your own journey is such a testament to that.
Thank you.
Um, and in that it was the relationships that grew your career, not one specific right resume at the right time, but people knew your work ethic.
Yeah.
People knew you were able to capture emotion with your technical ability, that you showed up on time, you're fun to be around, and you got the job done. And so I think that the way that you even talk about what your journey has been, I hope helps break down some things that people think are intimidating or barriers to entry. There's no barrier to entry. You just got to do it. And I think that the success that we'll talk about, you getting in Netflix and how they found you, and the unlikelihood that this kind of a show created by you, right? Because we don't look like the people that normally get to make a show.
Yeah, not at all.
And what your show is about, and that your show has literally impacted families and impacted kids, to the fact that Peabody has really acknowledged the impact that you've had in the way kids are feeling about themselves and learning how to learn, is really exciting. So I'd love to talk a little bit about how that happened and where all of your preparation made you ready for that opportunity.
Yeah, also a trip. Like I made this short at the short mentioned earlier at Cartoon Network, that was based off of my student film, and at Cartoon Network it was like maybe like a almost a decade after I had done the student film. And I had kind of actually like mentally given up on like doing a show out of that, because I didn't necessarily have the greatest experience trying to make it into a show like really early in my career. Um, so it got a really good response at Cartoon Network, but it wasn't kind of as fast moving and just like addictive as maybe some of the other shows, and maybe stuff that they were looking to spend money on was not exactly like what Welcome to My Life was. I was disappointed by that, but it was also kind of that feeling of like, okay, well, it's like a business thing, so I guess I got to figure out what's going to happen. um, a friend of mine that I knew from like other another I also had worked on Phineas and Ferb at some point, so I knew somebody who was there as an executive, and then she had sort of risen in the ranks at Nickelodeon, and then all of a sudden she was at Netflix, and this was before they had really fully announced that they were doing anything. And she saw me at, this is so Hollywood, but she saw me at like a daytime Emmys. And I remember I had been griping a little bit on Facebook, like, does anybody want to make a show out of my short? Because, like, it doesn't seem like it's happening at Cartoon Network. And she saw me and she called out to me from like a distance and was like, we need to talk, like, call me up. And I was just like,
That's
okay,
crazy.
like, what's your email? and and then, yeah, like through that, through my friend Jill, like it basically turned into me ending up in this first group of creators at Netflix, where they basically said, um, at the time, like, we want to build this from the ground up. We want to make something that works different than other studios. Unless there's some reason it should stay the same, we could do it the same too, but we want to make sure that we kind of do this all through a process that builds it in a way that makes sense. And I was incredibly excited to be there. And I think it was this thing where they basically said, we're going to make a show with each of you. That's the deal. And what do you want to make? And because I couldn't make a series out of Welcome to My Life because it was still tied up at Cartoon Network, I came up with another idea. Like, I was like, oh well, I have this idea about like, how can I talk about the changes in my city? How can I talk about things that used to be here? And this thought of like how that connects to ghosts. And um, honestly, like the thought initially was that I had been to like a Sundance lab, I think, where it was about like new frontiers and new ways of telling stories, and they were exploring, can you tell stories through AR and VR? And honestly, it was like it's like an interesting thing to think about, because like the perspective of that I had was that it was really difficult to compare them, because whenever you did, to me, like a VR experience, you felt like a ghost.
Right.
um, and so I just kind of ran with that, and I was like, okay, well, um, maybe I can do a show that's about ghosts in this city, so that we can talk about like buildings that are confusing, like why they look like they've been there forever, but the rest of the things around it look new. And that turned into City of Ghosts. And it was also just this thing where, like, for me, it's maybe it's good for me when you tell me like, we want to make something that's never been done before, and we want to do it in a different way. But I think like, maybe sometimes like big corporations aren't prepared for what that means when you tell somebody like me that. But I just kind of went all out. And yeah, I was like, well, I didn't get to do that process that I was doing on Welcome to My Life to make a series out of that. So maybe I can do that on this new thing. But there was definitely a lot of terror with it, because I was also kind of like, the amount of freedom they were giving us at the beginning, there is this feeling of like, if I don't stick this landing, that's all on me, because I made all these choices to do this show this way, and I told everybody it was going to work. And if it doesn't work, there's nobody to blame but myself this time. So there was a lot of nervousness.
I think this is a huge, this is a perfect place to pivot because now you were somebody who's been scrapping for a job in a very freelance kind of way. But a lot of places that you work, there were people who worked on an animation job full time. There's so many other parts of the workflow. And many of these things came to the forefront probably of what you navigated now that you had a show that got greenlit. And now you're thinking about staffing, you're thinking about hiring, and there's a lot more to it than the 7 to 20 people that are in your actual artist creative timeline, which means there's management, there's coordinators, there's accounting, there's anything that any other small business would have. There's a job for you in this workflow. So I want to start by talking about, as you started looking at who am I going to hire, as you start looking at people's portfolios, what can you remember that stood out for you from the people that you were hiring? Whether they were friends, people you had known, people you'd gone to school with, or people who were coming up through the internship, right? You're such a huge proponent of creating opportunity and bringing people up with you. And so, can you help identify a characteristic, a personality trait, some way that they put their own portfolio together that captured your attention when you were now building your team?
Yeah, it's a difficult process. Like even just running a show, I think like I'm really glad that it happened after I had had the experience of directing, because there's like kind of to what you're saying, there's a lot of stuff that's mostly about managing people, more so than it is about like doing your job in a way. Like I mean that's part of your job, is to manage people. And also like you get so much more aware of all of the things that happen above the job that you used to have. Like I think as a board artist you don't typically get exposed as much to like the kinds of things that you have to address, like notes and just public facing things about your production and stuff like that. So like that said, I think when I started to hire, it was like it's still like the first time that I was doing that, so it was like really nerve wracking. Even from, one of the important jobs was like definitely like finding a producer that you click with, and there's different things that make that valuable to different productions. Like I think somebody who would be a good producer on my thing might not be a good producer on another thing, or vice versa. And like I don't know, like as far as portfolios, it was really looking for like, I think like things that sort of matched with my sensibilities, like just like, oh, that
You
feels
mean
like,
things you thought they were funny, or just you just liked the way that they drew stuff?
I think it's like, yeah, it's like funniness, it's subtlety, and there's a certain amount of drawing skill, yeah, where I was like, okay, this person understands the things that that I would need them to get. Like honestly, I'm not like a huge um like drafting nut, like where it needs to be really accurate. I think mostly for me it needs to um express an emotion, in addition to like having a general sense of like you kind of know layout a little bit, like you kind of like, even if it's a really rough drawing, you can get a sense of like characters placement in the space that they're supposed to be in. So like storyboarding, it can be a really complicated job because honestly it's like simplifying something down to the like its essence, but also being conscious of like we're making film, so like you have to be conscious of like how framing works and how stuff like that works, like things that are usually like a DP would handle that, or like a director of photography or something on like live action would be good at that type of thing. But a lot of that goes into storyboarding. So I think it was looking for that. It was looking for the ability to kind of like highlight important things in dialogue, or to keep dialogue simplistic. So it was sort of looking for the type of board artists that maybe I was, where it was like you're also a little bit of a writer. um but like I would say beyond the drawing, it was the thing that I'm looking for in people is mostly like an openness and like a collaboration mentality. Because there has to be like a comfort level and ability to give feedback both ways. So it's sort of like the person who I'm managing, I want them to feel comfortable coming to me with ideas. I want them to be comfortable presenting their work to me and not afraid, like if they've taken a chance doing something or trying something out. But likewise, there sort of has to be the ability from them to accept from me, like if like, okay, I see what you were trying to do, but maybe I'd rather do it this way, and for us to not necessarily fight about it, but to talk about it and to
Or
work
to
through
take it
it.
personally,
Yeah.
because it's difficult when so much part of the animation is personal drawing and personal art craftsmanship. And so in a second, things can change. You know, the scene's just not working, we're cutting it. And you have worked for a week on this character.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would imagine that it's really important you people who don't take things personally, people who can solve problems, and people who can do solutions pretty quickly without bitching about it, complaining.
Yeah. Or even if they take it personally, we can talk about it. Like if they can kind of just say like, "Oh, well, I really wanted to do it this way," and then they present like a like their thought behind it. I'm usually open to hearing it, and sometimes I'll still disagree, but sometimes like you can change my mind. Like it's not like it's
Mhm.
written in stone that we have to do it my way or not at all. So yeah, I think I always get really excited when people infuse something of themselves, like something that they're excited about into the stuff that they do. So like that's always enjoyable for me.
I love it. And in addition to the creatives that you were bringing onto your team, you had mentioned briefly finding a producer, and most producers don't draw. Most producers don't come from creative, but they are some of the most essential parts of the creative process and making a show happen. What other job positions were you have a hand in looking for that were not necessarily part of the creative team, but really essential to make your show a success?
I think like honestly, if because I was able to find producers who were talented and good at what they did, um, a lot of the positions of people that they needed to work with to like produce the show, I leaned a lot on them and what they needed.
People they
I think,
trusted,
yeah,
they
like I think
recommended somebody.
it was sort of like just people where they were interviewing them and they would say, "Oh, I got a really good vibe from this person because I need them for this role." Like, sometimes it's stuff like script supervisor or um, like location scout, or like it's not like their only job is location scout, but they can also like pivot to certain things. So I think for my particular show for City of Ghosts, it was definitely like um I think people that had to be a little bit flexible in what their job entailed. And that's not to say like in an exploitative way, because I don't want anybody, taking a job where they're expecting you to do a lot more than you're getting paid to do. Like that's never good. But I think it's more like if your job isn't like, completely full of responsibilities, but you have like a number of responsibilities that you're expected to do, um, that maybe you're not too uncomfortable like just like trying out doing that one particular thing.
I think that's so important that people realize that. And my favorite part about this is as you were looking through people's resumes and meeting candidates, that where they went to school or if they went to school doesn't sound like it was at the top of the list of what determined if they could be successful working with you.
Oh yeah, no way. It was like just it was mostly based on like well, in the case of like board artists, I think we definitely had like a small test to give, which is like kind
Can
of
you
like,
explain what a test is for those who are just
yeah.
starting out?
So, like for different TV shows, I don't really know if it works exactly the same for feature. I think sometimes, so like for
Features
TV,
do if it's big IP.
yeah. So for TV, like for Adventure Time, the there was this thing called a storyboard test where they'll give you like a short bit of writing that tells you something that's supposed to happen, like I don't know, like just a scene between characters. They might send you like um, a packet of like designs of the characters. They might send you like sample backgrounds, and then they kind of want to see what you do with that. So like, how would you board this thing that they've given you the instructions for? Like they've given you the characters, they've given you the place, and they've given you the description of what's supposed to happen. In that case, because like that show storyboarding was also writing, um, it's also kind of to see what your sense of humor is and how you write. So like if your tone is kind of correct for what the characters are supposed to be like and what they're saying, it's also a way for them to kind of see how you are at drawing and all that. And then you usually send that in, and you may or may not get the job. There's been plenty of tests where I didn't ever hear back from them. So, didn't get that. But you kind of, I mean, I had to kind of try to let it roll off you, but it's okay if it bugs you too, because it always bugs people when they don't hear back. Um, yeah, and I think like the ones that I've done for feature, that they'll sometimes give you like a real like a sort of a generic premise. Like I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it'll be like somebody has to go to the grocery store and then something happens and they can't make it, so board out that, and then you'll send in storyboards of whatever you want, kind of to see if that's that's what they like. That too, like I've definitely turned in some tests where I didn't get a job from it, but it's
What did
still
you learn in that process, though?
uh I think like maybe some of the things that I learned is just like how important it is that like to that you can have that, so you can see whether somebody's tone and sensibility is really the same as what you're looking for. Like in the cases where I didn't get the job, it honestly probably was just that like um my general tone and the way that I approached it wasn't something that they felt was right for either their studio or for the show. um which is like, it's not always a bad thing, because like you wouldn't kind of want to end up at a place where it turns out you don't fit, because that kind of, as an artist, can make you feel really insecure and really bad. So you definitely want to sort of like go to a place where there's already an understanding that you're at the same on the same page about a lot of stuff.
I love that. I it sounds to me like that also applies when one is finding their first places to be. It's so critical. Um, which I think also goes to finding mentors, finding people that inspire you or you want to learn from. I love that film festivals. There's so many animation festivals now, and there's so many big festivals that show animation, and that especially through COVID, so many festivals are available virtually. And I love encouraging young animators to go to the children's film festivals, go to annecy.com, go to AWNTV, where they're showing so many short animation, and find the people that are making stuff that you love. And the great thing about being in this time of social media is most of the time you can find them on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, or find their websites and email them and say, are you taking mentorships? Do you have an internship? Some people, it's just like you said, doing tests of their stuff. So that kind of world building, I find the world of animators to be incredibly family and incredibly open and not a big clique, which isn't true of all of the creative arts. And so I just love like your website's open and you share so much about what you're going through in a really real way. And there's ways people can literally tweet at you. Um, and why has that been important for you, that accessibility? And can you talk about what people should think about when they're looking for their first internship? Does not mean you're washing cars and babysitting for free. And if you're, and not everything that calls itself an opportunity is an opportunity for learning. Can you identify, Elizabeth, what somebody should make sure is a component if they are finding an internship or apprenticeship? What should they make sure is part of that before they move forward?
It's hard to say because I don't know which different programs are doing what. I know Cartoon Network used to have a pretty good one where you would get an experience of being on a production, mostly as like part of the production staff and not so much creative. Um, but the one thing that I think was fun was at the end of it, you would get to pitch your project idea to like a room full of people that you were working around for the past couple months or so. I think using those opportunities where you can get feedback on the work that you're doing, even if your internship isn't necessarily about doing that, the ability to just be able to talk to artists and see what they do and how they are and just what it's like to be around them is really, really valuable. Um, for stuff like I think like like I mentioned a lot earlier, but the most valuable thing was that DreamWorks training program for me, maybe more valuable than ever having like worked on any DreamWorks stuff because they teach you skills like pitching. There was like a pitch clinic. There's I think like when you can find internships where there's opportunities to sort of like still take classes and learn how to do things. That's really the best things that can come out of that, just like learning stuff. And then maybe like the ones that are also really good are sort of where you can see that people have been able to use that as like an entry point into actually working. Like I think that's just as far as like career goes, it's really valuable. Like if you hear like other people have had good experiences, that's always like a great indicator of like maybe that's a good one to apply for.
Word of mouth is key, and finding people on social media that list that internship on their website or on their interview and ask them how it was for them. I think with we have social media and people don't think to initiate that kind of conversation, um, which is a great reminder that chances are people are busy. But if you ask and you ask appropriately and nicely, being nice matters. That you'll get some sort of a response. I think that's helpful. Um, uh, and somebody had brought this up in the chat. More and more companies are doing paid internships. I do believe in limited unpaid internships as long as it's with someone or a group or that there is something specific about the way they're drawing that show or that you are specifically learning or it is an artist that you really vibe with what they make. Just because somebody has a show on the air or is famous animator, isn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good unpaid internship. I also make sure it's very limited.
For sure.
6 weeks, 8 weeks of unpaid, and then you've learned what you need to learn. I think, but I also think it's only in really specific environments where you're going to be supported. Your own work is going to get seen and critiqued, and you're going to get opportunity to learn either job skill set or art skill set. What do you think about that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I did do an unpaid internship at some point at Cartoon Network. It was something like limited to like 20 hours a week. But I think like my honest opinion in this economy, like people should be paying people for internships. It shouldn't. So like I always kind of am like, if you're a big studio and you're offering an unpaid internship, that seems a little ridiculous to me because like the people that could really use the money are probably the interns more than anybody
Yeah,
else. So I don't know. Jury's out on that for me, but like,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I think everybody has got to be a little different. I think the most important thing is paid or unpaid to make sure that you are in an environment where you are safe and supported. And at any given time, um, you don't feel safe or you're being told to wash people's cars or pick up. It's just not that's not the job. It's not a personal assistant job. And I think people feel like if they've made a commitment and they don't fulfill the commitment, that person's going to talk badly about them or they're going to get a bad reputation. But there is no situation upon when if you're having to work crazy hours, do things that are not safe, be in environments where you do not feel safe. I reiterate, paid or unpaid, that's not okay, and you have the right to say something.
For sure. Yeah.
I think it's important now that we talk about opportunity. And like you had mentioned earlier, you saw music videos and commercials as a way to build your hours of practicing your art and getting work. I think people, oh, I'm going to direct animation. I want to direct and direct The Simpsons, South Park. Okay, great. But there's 75 other lanes upon which you can pay your bills and have a steady job. That not all animation career is freelance artist. So I love that games, VFX post houses, any post house or edit shop that has a VFX department, a huge part of visual effects are animators and the skill sets of animation. And so if we look at the everything Disney's doing in the Star Wars world to, I mean, I just watched Moon Knight. Oh my goodness, that's 80% was all effects and animation. I also think people underestimate the opportunity, particularly for women and of writers, animators, and all pipeline in AR, VR, and games. These are all entertainment platforms. Also, um, so many digital platforms are blurring the lines between an animated cartoon and a graphic novel, right? There's moving boards, there's different storytelling techniques. Think about learning when you see a film festival that has an immersive program, it's a different type of storytelling that does utilize some animation techniques in a board kind of way. So get on the internet, look for these kind of terminology that hopefully will lead you down a rabbit hole of understanding that there are full-time career jobs that could be more 9 to 5 or could be more project to project, um, where a lot of companies have in-house teams that you're not necessarily going to have to freelance. So depending upon the kind of life that you want to have, there's a part of the animation career circle that is available to you. Elizabeth, any thoughts on that?
I agree with that. I mean, I think like there's just so many things you should try if you're able to, or if it sounds interesting to you. Like, I mean, I've thought about like maybe someday I'd want to do like a puppet thing because of Jim Henson, you know? And I think there's always going to be that like nervousness if you don't have experience in that, but everybody has to start at a particular point, and like nobody like came out of the womb knowing how to do any of that stuff. So I think just keep that in mind, that like you you should learn how to do as many different kinds of things as you feel like you want to, because life's kind of short. So I don't know.
So if a parent identified in their child interest or overt expression of interest, what do you recommend that kids do to practice their animation or classes that they should take just to explore if they are interested?
I mean, for one, keep being creative. I think for me, I never felt like I could stop doing that, even if somebody told me to. Like, even if I'm not drawing something, I'm sort of always imagining something. So I would say, like, also with drawing, it takes a lot of time to get good at it, you know. So like, give yourself that cushion. Like nobody's. I mean, I guess maybe some geniuses are, but like, uh, it's
I mean, do you think parents should put their kids at in life drawing classes? What sort of art classes? Because I
uh,
think it was
yeah.
really powerful for that your mother identified that the takeaway that you had in an early class was counterproductive, that it should still be
Yeah.
fun and joyful.
Um, I mean, I'd say like
Hi.
my daughter. Bye. I like it's hard because there's some that are going to cost a lot of money, so I don't want to like if money is like a limiting factor. Like there's definitely like online things. Like I think there's like a program, I forgot what her name is off the top of my head because I'm bad at remembering when on the spot, but there's like a Instagram thing called Draw Together that somebody
Okay.
is doing, where I think it's like free. It's just like you can watch her videos, and she does these really creative things that
That
are
any
really
kid could
good
do,
for kids.
or any
Yeah.
person could do.
Yeah, and so I think like there's also just a lot of tutorials online about how to draw characters that you love. Those can be good to just like see how people do it. There's actually like, I mean, there's a video that they made from Netflix about how to draw the characters from my show. I think there's a lot for each of their shows that where you can learn from artists that worked on the show how to draw the characters from that if that's what you like to do. Like honestly, to sort of like toot the horn of the library, you can go to the library and there's tons of books that you can check out about animation. There's this one that there's a couple that were, standards when I was in school, like the Illusion of Life is the Disney one, and then there's one called like the Animators Workshop Workbook, I think, by Richard Williams. That's pretty complicated, but it gives you like a good technical understanding of what a lot of animators are doing. And there's tons of books besides that can spark your creativity. And I think like I used to go to the library a lot, so um, you should just go there and see what they have in that section, because sometimes you'll find some surprising things that I probably don't know about that might be really good. Again, to talk about the library, like I remember that was some early inspiration for me. Sometimes you'll see that there's free talks with like people who do the things that you want to do. Like my grandparents, I think, had taken me to a talk by there were two political cartoonists that they really liked that gave a talk, and I remember we went to see it when I was a kid. And like I didn't even really know who they were, but it was really interesting to see grown-ups, really old grown-ups, talking about these careers in cartooning, and it kind of gives you this idea that you can do it too. So I would say just like honestly, like make use of all the opportunities you can find out there where there are like resources like that. Classes wise, I think like I'm trying to think of ones. I think actually the animation guild itself, I feel like, used to have classes. They probably still have classes, and those are pretty affordable, and I
Yeah.
don't think there's any requirement to like get in, except maybe I don't know if you have to be a member of the guild or not, but like
There's some, and we're going to share that link with the guild and the training courses. We'll talk about that when we wrap up. It's a good first step along with Toon Boom.
sure,
But
yeah, Toon Boom is also really good. Like you mentioned, I know like almost every single studio uses that for a lot of things. But definitely for storyboards, there's a lot of productions that rely heavily on Toon Boom, and yeah, I don't want to knock it as a program. I think it's really good. I'm just really slow at learning things. So.
the other amazing thing that Toon Boom has as aware of user-friendly software is they have a fantastic online learning that's free to everybody. They have tons of resources, tons of people sharing on their forums, and they have videos, just a lot of just free resources for all ages that I think is just a good first stop for everybody.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and online there's a ton of stuff. I mean, you can always also be looking at the App Store, or I don't know what the Android or non-iPhone equivalent is, but like sometimes just browsing to see what's new. And I know like my brother was trying to find some apps over the pandemic, and I think he was saying he really liked using one called like Flip a Clip as like an
Okay,
animation thing.
flip a clip.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. But there's all sorts of things like that where I think it's interesting to try. Like and usually, like you said about other things, there's usually a free version that you can try that might have annoying ads on it, but it's
But it's
free.
free.
Yeah.
I think also remember for those of you, and Lida will have this in the read. There's so many resources at the LA County Library in terms of if you don't have a computer, if you don't have access to Wi-Fi, the library is here for you to give you resource and access. And in the resource guide that we give you, there's going to be a lot of ways that whatever you need, chances are you can find it through LA Library. And I love the animation community on Twitter and on YouTube are insane and supportive. there's a huge political activism going around equal pay, around jobs for women, around characters of color and representation in animated world on all platforms. And you can learn a lot about how you and your voice is vibrant and wanted and how to find animation to match that. There are a lot of people that write for animation. So I want to talk about the Disney Writers Apprentice program and their TV animation department. Jay Francis has a program at Disney just for anime. They want animation writers and they want people from all walks of life who are great writers that don't know anything about animation in terms of the creative drawing side. So if you are funny or you've got a personal story or a really specific point of view, they want you writing on their shows, which I find to be incredible. And so you can Google the Walt Disney TV Animation Apprentice program. And and Jay Francis is always all over LinkedIn. And so there are more and more entry points to find that first place of pretty much any job that you could have had if you're a mid-career shift, and you've just started drawing your own cartoons or starting to play with moving image. Everything that you've done in your life applies to the world of animation, either on screen or in the production, because making animation is a full service industry. And whether you are an animator, running a company, running a freelance services, or you rep a bunch of writers, if you're somebody who's a good negotiator and a good rep, we need more reps for animated talent than ever. If you're an attorney, every animator needs contracts. So there's so many jobs that apply to our industry on the animation side and the visual effects side. So any other thoughts, Elizabeth, to encourage people to take that first step?
Yeah, just go for it. I want to see more people that are like a little bit more like us in this industry. So please, like I don't know, like apply for it, go for it. I'll do what I can to support all of you. I don't
That's
know how many people are out there, so like I don't
a
maybe
lot.
yeah.
But again, you're pretty accessible through I love your 8-bit on your website. That's how I knew we were going to be friends. Um, ElizabethEdo.com. And are there places that I'm always encouraging people that even when you're on a big job or a middle job, that we're always making our own stuff. We're always kind of thinking about new characters or drawing new images that could manifest into something down the road. How do you keep yourself creative, especially now that things have gotten busy and the stakes are higher and your time is spent a little differently with a successful show and your family, and like a lot of the business having to go to award shows, right? That's not something that, but are you constantly thinking about new characters? Are you writing short films? How do you keep yourself growing as an artist?
It's a little like stop and start feeling sometimes. Like there are times where I'll have a big idea and I just get really excited and I get kind of like tunnel vision about it, you know, where you're like that's all you're thinking about, and all the stuff you're taking in, it's kind of adding to that idea. But then there's also definitely downtime. So I think it's like getting better at knowing that about yourself, which I'm still not like necessarily adept at. So I don't want to be, recommending that to people and making you think that I'm great at it. But it is like a matter of like accepting that there are also going to be times where you need to take a break and rest. And that's what also is going to fuel you to come up with more stuff. So like, I think, yeah, just kind of knowing your speed, your own speed.
That's amazing. I can't thank you enough as we kind of wrap this up. Can you tell us a little bit about what's coming up for you?
Yeah, I've been working on the pretty soon. I think you're gonna see this project from me called Mall Stories that I've been working on through an
Mall, like
Unreal.
shopping mall?
Yeah, I like watched this documentary over pandemic called Jasper Mall, and it was just about a dying mall. And I just really liked the vibe of it, and I also really liked shopping malls. So it's a short that's about like a Mongolian grill in the shopping mall. That they're real people, and that's going to be out soon. And then pretty soon there'll be a collaboration with the Linda Lindas that's gonna be out that
Yay, we
people
love
will be
the
able to
Linda
see.
Lindas. LA
Yeah, so
Library loves the Linda Lindas.
yeah. So I'm really excited when people get to see what that is. And then yeah, I'm sort of trying to help them cook up some good stuff at Apple TV. Can't really talk about that very much, but like just that's sort of what I'm up to now. And then yeah, just keep an ear out for whatever else I'm doing, because sometimes stuff comes up out of nowhere. So yeah, I think mostly though I'm really excited for people to see the mall project that I've been working on for a while.
Amazing. Amazing. So, any last thoughts, tips, encouragement for those, especially the self starters in our group?
Um, this is gonna sound really specific, but don't get into it too into like those things that are like 30 under 30 lists or stuff like that, you know. um there's like a
Spaced
timeline for,
out.
yeah, there's like a timeline for everybody, you know. And I think that like this is almost like me trying to give advice back in time to my own self, because there are a lot of things that come out like that where you're like, oh well, it's probably I don't have a chance to be anybody now because I'm already this old and I haven't made it onto one of those things and I'm just starting. But ignore that, because there's no reason why anything has to happen on somebody else's timeline. You get to decide that.
I love it. Um, I want to offer for those of you, this is a beautiful community of people that are incredibly accessible everywhere digitally. The digital world and closet door is wide open in terms of the animation community on every platform. That's a great place to start, great place to ask questions, great place to learn about everybody's journey. People are incredibly forthcoming about the things that work for them and didn't work for them. For those of you who are artists, I don't care what your background is. I don't care if you finished school, if you went to school. You are not going to be judged by your life experience. If anything, your life experience is going to make you more interesting to us as storytellers. I'm more interested in those that have been through an institutional system than and those who've been through real life stuff, and those who are embracing their culture and bringing it into our narratives. I think hard work, people who really are passionate about creating, and people who are easy to get along with, who can go with the flow and don't melt down when things change, is way more important to me than when you went to school. Somebody who's going to be on time and understand that 15 minutes before we start is on time, and is really dedicated and coming up with great solutions instead of waiting to be asked to do something, are the value set that I love having on our team. And so if you do not, there were those little, remember those ads when we were little? I think it was from Art School of America or something. And it had like a mouse or some character. It's like, can you draw this?
Yeah.
If you could be a cartoon. But honestly, that is it. I
Yeah.
had the opportunity to spend the day with Rob Armstrong, who is the creator of Jumpstart, the cartoon. And his first influence was Peanuts. And so when he was young, he asked to meet Mr. Schultz. Could he write him a fan letter? And the person gave him the best advice. Don't write him a fan letter. Draw his characters. And so he perfected and started writing and made a couple of specs when he was a teenager. He made this really funny strip with Snoopy, and it's on his website. It's a really great story. And he sent that to Mr. Schultz, and Mr. Schultz took him on as a mentor. to the day he died, they were friends. And the Franklin character ended up being named, given a last name because they needed a last name when they were making one of the Franklin's like first animation. And Mr. Schultz called Rob and asked him, "Can I name him your last name?" And so the journey of that, and now Rob's been the number one Black cartoonist syndicated, and for 33 years, Jumpstart's been a daily strip, and I loved learning from him that that's how he found his mentor and his inspiration. He just drew and practiced drawing the images that were inspiring him, and I just thought that was so back to basics, you
Yeah.
know.
And my mentor Corny said he used to just always tell people, stay true to yourself, stay true to you. And I think that's always what he looked for in people's portfolios, and that's kind of what I look for too, to be honest. Like people that are um, just really, really giving you their heart in their artwork.
Absolutely, because I think people can practice certain characters if you're going to get on a show that has really strong, well-known characters. You got to be able to technically do that work. But there's
Sure.
so many parts of it. If you're really funny and you can write really well or come up with great plausibilities or paint backgrounds, there's so many ways you can contribute, even if you can't draw a perfect Iron Man.
Yeah.
So I encourage everybody that has a story to tell and wants to get into animation to take a stab at it. There's a lot of cool things in the journey. You'll learn about yourself and you might end up with a career. So we want to encourage you to start with Toon Boom and then to find the website, which will be in the resource packet for the Animation Guild that does events all over and is a great place to start when you're thinking about a career and learning those next steps. So thank you, Elizabeth. I hope that you can hear our digital audience cheering for you. We really,
Thank
really,
you.
for those of you who have additional questions, I'm at Hollywood Shorts on Insta or Twitter. My DMs are open. Also, for these you have questions, the library is here to facilitate, and Lida will forward to me things that are appropriate for me to answer. And please go to Elizabeth's social media and post that you enjoyed meeting her and show your appreciation. Thank you so much. Thanks for having us, Lida.
Thank you.
Thank you both. It's been so enjoyable to hear your personal perspective on what seems to be a fascinating career. So thank you to Kimberly and Elizabeth for participating today. The information was valuable and we really appreciate your insight. Visit our website at lacountylibrary.org/creative careers to see the lineup we have upcoming. The website also has recordings and resources for past events in this series. If you're interested in participating in any more of our upcoming virtual programs, please visit us at lacountylibrary.org. Thank you all again, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.